Welcome, Housewives of True Crime. Happy Monday, everybody. A lot of you guys are maybe listening on Tuesday because you had a day off with your kids for Indigenous People Day, formerly known as Columbus Day. And some of you, your kids had to go to school. I don't know what rhyme or reason they decide which ones get off and which ones don't, but two of mine had off and one of them didn't. So there is that. But if you had a day off, well, congratulations. Hopefully you guys had some relaxing family time. If not, then hopefully you had a good day at work and you had me in your ear for the commute. So I am in Florida for family weekend for my daughter. So if you're watching on YouTube, you could see I am again in a hotel room. This time it's a smaller room than they gave me before. So I don't have such a good area. And if you are also watching on YouTube, you will see this is where the closet is, which I'm pointing to, which is behind me, but it's a little bit further down in the hallway. And I was recording and my husband was getting ready I thought he was just kind of packing up, but I didn't really realize because I was in the middle of recording when he walked into the hotel room. And I had my script up, so I couldn't actually see what was going on behind me. And when I realized he was back there, I turned around and I saw that he was getting ready for the pool, meaning he was fully booty ass naked on film. And had I not caught that, my poor editor, Damian, would have had a real interesting way of, I don't know what he would have done to actually get rid of the naked husband behind me. So anyways, I had to start over. So this is the second time around that I am recording because I don't think anybody wants to see my husband naked behind me as I'm talking about a case. So second time around, here we go. Also, I just wanted to say, I went and took my daughter, Sean and I took her last minute. We left at 12 o'clock yesterday, got to Disney World at 2 for the Food and Wine Festival at Epcot. If you have never done it, it is delicious. Save up like a huge appetite and you go to all the different worlds around Epcot and you try, there's about 3 different things that they have at each one and they're like sample size. Save your money and your appetite for this event if you can, because it's so fun. So Sean and I took Kyla yesterday and we had the greatest time. And now we are headed back home. Oh, and I wanted to ask you all, I'm taking my son, he has Severs. I don't know if I've told anybody this yet on the podcast, but he has Severs. So if any of you have had your sons or daughters have this, it's a foot issue that kids have during their growth spurts, and it's so debilitating for Colton. So I'm trying this new thing tomorrow called a Rusty, which is like this muscle manipulation. But if you have gone through this with your kiddos, let me know what has worked for you. We are in the thick of it. We've tried a boot. We have tried physical therapy. We have orthotics that I've ordered on the internet that look like, they were going to save his life, but he's still, every single day he's coming home after sport or after PE or after whatever he's doing and he can barely walk. So tomorrow, first thing in the morning, I'm taking him to this new thing. So if anybody's ever done a Rusty, let me know if that's worked for you also. Okay, and now let's get into the case today. Okay, this case today comes out of Cherokee County, Georgia. The motto is, in this county, is where the metro meets the mountains. And when you see a picture of this place, it makes perfect sense. It's located about an hour north of Atlanta. It's close enough for a commute for people that have, city jobs, but it gets you completely out of the city into the mountains. It's very, very lovely. The population of this area is 300,000 people and it's spread out over 420 miles. So it's big. And I'm kind of talking about the county, not specifically the town. The median home price is just over $500,000 for a single family home. But the home that I'm talking about, or actually like kind of the farm that I'm talking about today, isn't your average Cherokee County home. This house is 8,900 square feet, which is huge, 6 bedrooms, 8 baths, and it sits on 10 acres. Has multiple structures. It has a barn, has an apartment above the barn. And according to Zillow, this home sold last in 2019 for $1 million. And right now, it could be for sale for $2 million. I'm talking about a real good investment. This property was also a perfect place for the Ferris family because there was a lot of them. The Farrises, that is, Gary and Melody, that is the matriarch and patriarch of the family. Well, Gary, the dad, grandpa, also the one everyone called Big Daddy. He was 6'4", 300-pound guy, hence the name Big Daddy. And Melody, the mom and grandma, she was an itty bitty thing, about $120. They had 4 kids together, Scott and Chris, the boys, and Amanda and Emily, the girls. And by 2018, Gary and Melody's kids were grown, and they actually had 6 grandkids of their own by this time, which is so fun because Gary and Melody in 2018 were only about 58 years old. Gary loved being a grandpa. He also loved having this big property. Actually, Melody loved having this big farm even more than Gary. But they had a lot of space for their kids and their family to come over. Living this ranch lifestyle was really what they loved. Gary, by day, was actually an attorney going to Atlanta, where he had a division of his law firm that he had brought over from Alabama. He was a corporate guy, suit and tie guy by day, and ATV, riding guy by night. One other fun or not so fun fact about Gary was he wasn't a super healthy guy. Being 300 pounds, you can expect that health wasn't on Gary's top priority. And in some reports, they noted that Gary smoked like a chimney, a couple packs a day. His wife, Melody, also had been reporting to her family that Gary was having these weird spells where he would get dizzy, not feel so well, and almost pass out. He also had a sleep apnea machine called a CPAP that he used every single night because he had pretty severe sleep apnea. All in all, everyone knew Gary had his health complications, but at 58, he was kind of managing them. Sometimes downing Mountain Dew with his blood pressure medication, but he was managing them. On July 5th, 2018, when Gary's family hadn't seen him in a couple days, they started to worry. You see, on July 3rd, Gary and Melody were just kind of doing normal married couple things, arguing about who was going to cook dinner that night, when Melody told Gary there was enough food in the fridge for an army, and if Gary wasn't satisfied with what they had, well, she wasn't going to change it. Scott, their son, who actually lived on the property, he lived in that apartment above the barn. He was in and out that day, but left, around, I think, probably lunchtime, a little after lunchtime, and didn't come back until 11:30. Never came back into the house. He just went to his apartment above the barn, which was about 100 yards from the actual house. Melody says after the food conversation that her and Gary had, he retreated to his own floor, which was the basement. Gary had built himself a man cave in the basement that basically had like all of whatever Gary needed to live. And Melody, she had her own floor that she lived on in the house. So I would say, just by knowing that maybe their marriage wasn't copacetic. Now, you're probably thinking, like me, what about July 4th? Because the last time anybody saw Gary was July 3rd, and now we're talking July 5th when everybody gets concerned about where's Gary, and July 4th being a holiday and where people mostly gather with families, firecrackers, fireworks, whatnot. Well, Big Daddy was nowhere to be seen that day. I guess the Ferrises were not actually that close. as I thought, because no one said, "Where's Big Daddy?" Melody went about her day having her two granddaughters over, and actually, they did think about Big Daddy once because they asked to ride the ATVs. Well, Melody told them to go look for Big Daddy to help them, but the girls never found him. So by July 5th, when Gary still hadn't shown up, the family started to wonder where the heck Gary was. At this point, the whole family had come to the farm besides Emily. She, I guess, had something else to do. But Melody, Chris, Amanda, and Scott all came to the farm to search for Gary. They did think initially that maybe Gary went to the office in Atlanta, but his car was still in the garage, making it seem like he didn't leave. So the family starts combing the 10-acre property. About 100 yards from the main house, Scott finds a burn pit with smoldering ashes still in it. He ran over to look, and what he saw was horrifying. He found human remains, particularly a part of a human skull. So Scott immediately calls 911.
My father has come up missing, and we just searched the property. It's a small farm, and I just found something near the fire that doesn't. He was burning brush. Now there's stuff in the fire that it could be him. I don't know.
Okay. All right, sir. What's Purcell Lane run off of?
It's right off of Birmingham Road.
You said 2155 Purcell Lane. That's correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is your name?
Scott Ferris. Farris.
How old is you said your father?
Yes, sir.
How old is
he just turned 68 on the 68. Yeah.
68. Okay.
Now I'm calling you to say that we've been walking around looking for him, and I went where the fire's still smoldering, and I'm ex-military. I was deployed to Iraq. I've seen what burned up bodies look like, and this looks like a body.
Okay. All right, sir. I've got him on the way out there for you. I'm going to send the police and the fire department out there. Just try and lead everything that you can, the way you found it down there, and we've got him on the way out there for you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything else I can do for you, sir?
No, that'll be it.
All right, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, if you couldn't hear all of it, Scott tells the dispatcher that in the process of searching their property for his dad, he came across something that he had seen before when he was in the military and deployed in Iraq. Now, that to me is, I don't know, like a little bit worrisome, but I guess they have burn pits in Iraq, and I also think it's probably pretty common to have burn pits on your farm. Of course, Scott thought immediately that the skull was his dad's. The initial thought was that Gary must have had one of those medical spells that he was having while he was tending to the fire in the burn pit. Like I said, having burn pits on the property was pretty usual, so that was nothing out of the ordinary. And Melody knew that Gary was having these spells where he often sometimes would faint. So actually, one of these spells put him in the emergency room back in April. So maybe Gary just fell into the fire when he was having one of these spells. But that theory was quickly erased when investigating Gary's remains. They found a bullet lodged in Gary's rib cage. This case now went from missing dad that maybe had a fainting spell and fell in the fire to a homicide. The family farm was now a crime scene, and investigators were searching everything. They searched the house and the barn for weapons or anything else that looked suspicious. They found several guns and ammunition in the barn, as well as a shotgun in the house. Melody and Scott were also the last people to have seen Gary alive, so their hands were tested for gunshot residue, and both came back negative. Investigators found drops of blood on the floor in the kitchen and on the steps that led to the basement and on the basement floor as well. They also found a .38 caliber bullet on the basement floor. It was the same type of bullet that was found lodged into Gary's rib. Blood detecting chemicals were sprayed in the house, and it detected even more blood on the walls near the front door, and it looked like someone had cleaned up because they had been smeared all over. You know, when they put that aluminol, you can kind of see it, kind of like if somebody tries to clean it up, it looks like a big, wipe mark. Blood in the kitchen also led to the basement door, down the stairs, across the basement to the sliding glass door, and then to the patio outside. Detective Hayes theorized that Gary had been shot in the kitchen. Then, as he ran downstairs to get away from the assailant, they fired a second time, missing him, leaving that bullet in the basement where it was later found by the detectives. Then it looked like the blood trail led out to the patio. Now, I keep on calling these remains Gary, but at this point, that was only speculation, right? Investigators would not actually have confirmation that it was Gary for almost a year, which is a very long time for them to figure out the DNA of these charred bones was actually Gary Farris. Since Gary's body had been almost incinerated in this burn pile, determining the time of death was going to be very difficult. Detectives questioned Melody, Scott, and Chris, who had all seen Gary on the 3rd, about when they had seen him. Scott said he saw his father in the middle of the afternoon around lunchtime. Chris said that he saw Gary later that afternoon around 5:30, and Melody said that Gary went downstairs in the basement around 8:30. Forensics were able to check on data from Gary's CPAP machine that he used every single night when he slept, and they determined that, Gary mostly went to bed between 11 and 1 o'clock in the morning, and the last time that machine was used was the night of the 2nd to the morning of the 3rd. Since Melody was the last person to see him alive, they narrowed down Gary's time of death between July 3rd, 8:30 at night, and July 4th at 1 a.m. because, like I said, he never put that CPAP machine on the night of the 4th, or the night of the 3rd, actually. So, sometime after Melody says he went downstairs at 8:30, he never put his CPAP machine on. And of course, investigators wanted to question and really question the family first. Melody was the first of the Ferris family member to be questioned in Gary's death. Detective Daniel Hayes led the investigation for the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office, and he asked Melody if she had anything to do with Gary's murder. Well, she denied any involvement and said she has no idea who would have killed Gary. The detective asked Melody if she had heard gunshots that night, because if you hear a gunshot in a house, it is very, very loud. But Melody said she didn't hear any gunshots and that there were a ton of fireworks going off on the 4th, but that was just from, 4th of July holiday celebrations, no gunshot that she heard. In another part of the interview, he asked Melody if the boys, meaning Chris and Scott, had any issues with Gary. Well, she had plenty to report there. According to Melody, Scott and Gary had gotten into fights, and even physical fights, where Scott, she says, was hot-tempered. According to Melody, Scott was freeloading, living there, and Gary was just giving him spending money to go play golf or go to the lake with friends. And Scott, was just living in that apartment and living off Scott's money. She said Chris was also stealing from Gary and even took checks from the house. At first, she said that Chris had broken in, but then corrected herself and said, well, he came in and took checks from Gary. Melody was literally referring to her own children as common criminals. According to Melody, the only people in the family that weren't milking Gary for money was herself and Amanda. Melody claimed that Amanda asked her why everyone else hated the two of them, and Melody answered that she and Amanda were the only ones in the family that didn't steal from Gary. Amanda told detectives that she was worried about Scott and Chris also. According to Amanda, Scott had threatened their mom and said he was going to burn the house down. She went on to say that Scott said he and Chris were going to take the whole estate from Melody. She claimed that she feared for her and her mom's safety from her brothers. Sounds like a messy family situation going on in the Ferris wheel family. Scott told detectives that he had gotten home around 11:30 that night on the 3rd, but didn't go into the main house. He just stayed in the apartment. He also told detectives that he had seen a pistol in the basement recently and that it wasn't there anymore. Scott also saw that Melody had his dad's wallet, and when he asked her where she got it, she said it was in the console of Gary's car. Scott thought that was real weird because Gary never left his wallet in his car. The brothers told the detective that Melody would say things like, I can't wait for the day I don't have to live with him, and that she wished he, meaning Gary, would just have a heart attack and die. It seems like everyone had everything to gain from Gary's death. It was a finger-pointing game at this point, and it seemed that Melody and Amanda were on one team, and Chris and Scott were pointing back at the other team. And thankfully, Emily was like, I'm not even going over there. This thing is like a crazy mess. Chris told detectives that when Gary was in the hospital in April, that Melody had been mad at him, but out of the blue, she came in with some cookies, and that as soon as he ate the cookies, his throat burned and he started feeling really sick. He was so sick that he was hospitalized. Gary flat out told Chris that he thought Melody was trying to poison him through food, that she had added something to make him sick. Per Gary, she was the reason he kept having these so-called spells. Since Gary's remains were burned to the point of, almost cremation, there was no testing any toxins to see if Melody was actually poisoning him. Detective Hayes also asked Melody directly if there had ever been any infidelity in this marriage. She denied ever having strayed from her vows, but that wasn't also entirely true. Ted Wiley had been with Gary, so this gets a little convoluted, so just stick with me here. There was this guy, Ted Wiley. He had been with Gary's sister, Sherry, for like 20 years. That relationship ended when Sherry found out that Ted and Melody had been seen together out and about in town. So that affair caused a rift between Gary and Melody moved out. Scott told Dateline that she actually was staying at Ted's farmhouse and refused to come back for months until Gary filed for divorce. Once he did file for divorce, she moved back home. And according to Scott, Gary told Scott that he had to accept his mother back into his life because Gary really still wanted to be with Melody. He really loved her. So he bought her this big house in Cherokee County with this big farm to kind of lure Melody back in. His son said that he loved Melody until the day that he died, but he also didn't trust her. So apparently he put trackers on her car, controlled her spending, didn't give her the credit card, would cut her off if she spent too much. He would also cut off her cell phone. I mean, that seems like a really kind of awful marriage. And they're living on different floors in the house. Doesn't sound very copacetic. During the investigation, detectives also searched through Melody's purse, and in that they found a credit card with a name that they didn't recognize, a name called Roy Barton. When they asked Melody about this person, she said, oh, it was her cousin's dead husband. He had passed away 4 years ago. Her cousin, Martha Jane Barton, had given her a credit card back in 2014 when Melody was helping take care of Martha Jane. She told detectives that she had even forgotten that she had the card and swore it hadn't been used for 4 years. Well, detectives pressed even harder about this one and about her having an affair, and Melody just doubled down and said, nope, never had an affair. She would not admit any of it. She wouldn't admit Ted. She wouldn't admit anything. But they pressed harder and harder, and she finally cracked, but not about Ted. She said she had one relationship outside of her marriage, and it was with a man named Rusty Barton, Roy Barton's son, her cousin, Martha Jane's stepson. So she tries to downplay this affair, but everyone knew, including her own children. In fact, when Emily got married, her daughter got married in 2016, Melody invited Rusty to come to the wedding, where she kind of danced a lot with Rusty, and people kind of speculated if they were having an affair. Melody told the detectives that she had ended this affair a year ago, but still talked to Rusty on the phone. The police didn't totally buy it, and they were onto something. The affair wasn't really over. We didn't know that. They discovered that the credit card they found in Melody's wallet, the one she said was her cousin's late husband, actually belonged to Rusty. Rusty was a nickname. His real name was Roy, just like his father. Rusty had given the card to Melody to use in case of an emergency or in case, Gary cut off her spending. Plus, he got her a cell phone that gave them privacy. Cell phone records show that she talked and texted to Rusty nearly every hour of the day, every single day, up to and including July 5th, 2018, and the day that Gary's remains were found in a burn pile. At first, Rusty denied that he knew anything about Gary's death. Detectives questioned him with his lawyer present, and Rusty never wavered, even after they said they knew about Melody's secret cell phone. However, after forensically examining Rusty's phone, they did discover something interesting. Some searches in his data. They found searches on Rusty's phone looking for information on how to delete text messages. Rusty, maybe don't search that on your own phone. And other searches asking if cops can find text messages. He had also deleted Melody's name from the contacts and replaced it with initials X and O. And it just so happens that Melody has a tattoo of X and O on her body, and she told detectives that it was symbolic of her and Gary's relationship. And I'm calling BS on that. Cops pushed Rusty pretty hard until he finally told the truth, or somewhat of the truth. He confessed that on early July 4th, Melody told him something at the end of their conversation, something to the point of, he is in the burn pile. Rusty asked her to repeat herself, and she said again, he is in the burn pile. Rusty said he had cut her off right then and told her not to say another word or tell him anything, that he just does not need to know that. That put Melody at the very top, of course, of the suspect pile. They also learned that despite Gary's profession as a lawyer, he did not have a will. So if he was to die, the only beneficiary would be Melody. So she was charged with murder with malice, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and concealing the death of another in June of 2019. She was granted bond for $250,000 and was released early November. Melody would live free until, you guys, 5 years later, October of 2024, for almost, what is that? I mean, June 2019 until October of 2024, she was just out and about because COVID and all this stuff, these delays. She finally did go to trial. The Cherokee County Assistant District Attorney was ready to present their case that Melody Ferris killed her husband so she could have access to his assets, reportedly worth millions of dollars. With Gary out of the way, she could be free to be with Rusty Barton. The challenges they faced, including the other suspects, Chris, Scott, and Emily, who the defense presented as financially gaining from Gary's death. There was no murder weapon found, and the defense leaned heavily on this one. Like, how did this tiny 120-pound Melody move the hulking 6'4", 300-pound husband into a burn pile? Which also, I am very curious how she would do that as well, especially if he's down in the basement. Like, he went down to the basement after he was shot first. I don't know how she gets him from the basement all the way up to the patio, but I guess if there's a will, there's a way. The defense pointed fingers really at Gary's son, Scott, because he was 6'8", and he was physically able to carry Gary's body. The prosecution argued that Melody had access and knew how to operate a tractor and RTVs, which would either be used to, make and burn and move things around. They theorized that Melody could have rolled Gary's body from the house to the burn pit as well. The trial was nearly 3 weeks long, and it was all over court TV, which we love. There are numerous Reddit threads and Facebook pages with deep discussions about this case. Melody and Gary's children, detectives, forensics experts, and Melody's boo, Rusty, all took the stand, you guys. After his testimony, still during the trial, the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office received a phone call from someone who was following the trial very closely. It was Melody's cousin, Martha Jean Barton, widow of Ray Barton and stepmother to Rusty Barton, Melody's lover. She had listened to Rusty testify about this gun that his father owned, and it sparked her memory. Her late husband had given her a pistol for Christmas one year, a .38 caliber snub-nose pistol, the same caliber that had been used to kill Gary Farris. Martha went to look for this gun, and it was missing. And Melody had a key to her house. She tore the house apart looking for this gun, but it was nowhere to be found. And that is when she called the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office and told them about this missing gun. Martha was called as a surprise witness for the prosecution, where she explained about realizing the gun was missing. The defense tried really hard to paint her as a religious woman who was only concerned about saving face after her stepson was outed for having an affair with a married woman, but her testimony certainly cast a shadow on Melody's guilt. Closing arguments were really interesting. The defense brought 2 heavy bags to demonstrate how a 185-pound man struggled to move the bags. Their point was that it was impossible for Melody to move Gary's body. The prosecution didn't put on any theatrics. They didn't really have to. They closed by stating the fact that there was no evidence that pointed to Scott Ferris as his father's killer. All the evidence was pointed right back to Melody. The jury went behind closed doors, and at the end of the first day, they had not reached a verdict. Same thing the second day. They actually requested additional information, and they came back and said they were hung, that there was one juror that just could not find Melody guilty. So the judge sent them back again and asked them to try one more time. And that one more time pushed the last juror over the edge, and Melody Ferris was charged on all counts guilty as charged. She was able to give a statement like they all are at her sentencing, and boy, did she take it.
Ferris, do you have a statement?
I do.
All right.
I've written this so that I can get through the words.
Okay.
On July the 5th, 2018, 6 years, 5 months ago today, began the worst nightmare that I could have ever imagined. Not only my world, but my family's world was absolutely destroyed at the hands of one person. I've had 6+ years of being told not to talk. Don't say that. Take legal advice. I could walk out of this courtroom today and drop over dead. I want to make sure that my children, my grandchildren, and Gary's family, and to be honest, at this point in time, the entire world who has viewed this. I have waited for years to make this statement to everyone.
As she spoke, the camera was on Chris's face as he shook his head in disbelief and whispered, "Are you serious?" The camera passed over to Scott, who was also in disbelief, looking at his brother and just shaking his head. The prosecution cuts her off after 4 minutes, and the judge told her, "Melody, like, if you continue talking about the facts in this case, then we are going to allow the prosecution to cross-examine you." And at that point, Chris gave the judge a big thumbs up. The judge warned Melanie that her statement should stick to sentencing, but if she continued to profess her innocence, then he would allow prosecution to come up and give her some questions herself. The prosecution told him that she was fine with that and would question Melody after her statement. She continued, and Chris can be seen throwing his hands up in the air at her accusations against Scott. Melody spoke for 20 minutes, you guys, about how she did not kill Gary and how Scott did, and how everyone got it wrong, from the detectives to the prosecution. What struck me was her sobbing and wiping her nose, but not one single tear can be seen. The judge spoke about legislative requirements of giving Melody a life sentence for Gary's murder, but decided that he would allow her to be considered for parole after 30 years. He added an additional 5 years for count 4, which was concealing the death of another, which was going to be served consecutive in her life sentence. She received another 5 years for lying to police about the relationship with Rusty, but the judge determined that this part of her punishment could be served concurrently with her life sentence. Melody also received credit for the time served while she was in Cherokee County Jail. The judge ordered Melody to have no contact with her family members, meaning she could not initiate contact. However, they can initiate contact with her if they wish. Melody Farris will be eligible for parole when she is 94 years old. All right, you guys, that is the case of Gary Farris. May he rest in peace, and may their family get off of this crazy Ferris wheel and have some solace and, I don't know, be a more normal family at this point. I feel for them. Okay, I am back on Wednesday for Wake Up Wednesday, so don't miss that. Also Thursday, if you are on my Patreon, I will see you then. If you are not, you can join the Clink Clink Club right now on Apple. If you just go to my page and subscribe, it's only $4.99. So it's like buying me less than a cup of coffee from Starbucks every single week, and you get a new episode every single Thursday. I also have bonus content on Spotify if you listen there, or if you don't, you can go to patreon.com/Housewives of True Crime. Okay, until next week, or until Wednesday, or until Thursday, Clink Clink.